Hi there. It's the holidays, so I decided to compare something a little special, a Charlie Brown Christmas. But somebody already did that, and I had problems with my script, so I went with a different Christmas classic. The difficulty director Terry Gilliam had releasing his 1985 film Brazil in the United States is well documented in Jack Matthews' book The Battle of Brazil, first published in 1987 and later adapted into a video essay for the Criterion Collection's deluxe edition of the film. Without rehashing too much, producer Arnaud Milchan financed Brazil with funding from two different studios, Universal, who in return received North American distribution rights, and 20th Century Fox, who got Europe and the rest of the world. Once done editing, Gilliam's final cut ran 2 hours 22 minutes. Despite contracts calling for the film to be no more than 2 hours 5, he decided to go ahead and submit it to Fox anyway. Knowing the kind of film they had on their hands, Fox said no problem, and released the movie as Gilliam delivered it. Then, despite Milchan advising them to cut at least 10 more minutes before showing it to Universal, Terry felt they could handle it and decided to submit it to them anyway. They'd already seen a rough cut about 20 minutes longer, and though pleased with how it seemed to be shaping up, had already expressed some worry about the length. What came next, though, seemed to have less to do with length, and more to do with Universal's then-president Sid Sheinberg having a midlife identity crisis over wanting more creative input into Universal's productions. One reason for this might have been that 1984 was a pretty rough year for Universal, barely earning a spot in the year's top 20 grossing films. 1985 would turn out a lot better for them thanks to Back to the Future, a film Sheinberg famously wanted to call Spacemen from Pluto, but the start of the year was shaky, and they were on the hook to the tune of $4.5 million already for Brazil alone. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly $13 million, a lot of feijoada for an uncommercial film, so lightening its mood and getting it to 2 hours could have theoretically helped make Brazil a hit. In theory, anyway. But Sheinberg didn't understand Brazil or Terry Gilliam, so his decision to take the film for himself was, at least in retrospect, destined to fail from the start. Whatever made Sid Sheinberg think Brazil could ever be anything other than a prestige picture for Universal remains a mystery, but it resulted in more or less 3 different versions assembled or released in 1985. There's Gilliam's 2 hour 22-minute European cut, his revised 2 hour 12 edit for Universal, and the disastrous Sheinberg-overseen Love Conquers All version, which Universal dumped onto the syndicated television market and runs a scant 94 minutes. Gilliam's US edit did win out for its North American theatrical release, though, as well as its eventual home video release. Thanks to a subversive publicity campaign Gilliam and fans at Universal took directly to the press, and it was this version that received 2 Oscar nominations at the 58th Annual Academy Awards. While I'll be ignoring Sheinberg's Love Conquers All version, which despite its runtime features a ton of unique or alternate footage, the 2 versions Gilliam approved in 1985 are what all the fuss was about. Since I don't think anyone's ever gone frame by frame to specify all the differences between them, I'm going to be focusing on these. I should also mention Criterion's hybrid final director's cut, which has so far been and likely always will be Gilliam's final word on the matter, but this is just the original European version with the clouds opening from the US up top. Some of the differences between the US and European versions of Brazil are a little difficult to classify. As you can tell by their lengths, the US primarily removes footage from the film, but it does have some unique things of its own. Some music and dialogue were moved around to accommodate the changes, and while some scenes were cut in their entirety, little trims here and there around edit points were more common. Apart from their different logos, the US version originates the clouds opening with Jeff and Maria Muldaur's rendition of Brazil playing under it, which was carried over to the final cut from Criterion. After logos, the original European edit begins with the text Arnaud Milchan presents a Terry Gilliam film in white against a black background, which was jazzed up a little bit for the US cut, a la a light blue haloed text. For some reason there is a slight jump cut at the start of the UK Central Services commercial, reframing the TV with 5 or so frames being cut. This is one of the telltale signs the Criterion cut merely duplicates the European edit, apart from its cloud opening. This shot playing smoothly in Gilliam's American edit. The second alteration is its first deleted scene, the Buttle family's daughter asking her mother how Santa can bring them presents if they don't have a chimney he can come down through. This acts as a segue to the hole cut in the ceiling before Buttle's arrest. Many significant cuts in the US version involve references to Christmas and Santa Claus. I presume being targeted by Sid Sheinberg, as it's the sort of thing executives would think wouldn't play well to an American audience. Gilliam and editor Julian Doyle do seem to have had a pretty free hand in assembling their own US edit, though, and the film's sardonic depiction of the holiday season is impossible to remove. The US version reinstates Sam's line, "My God, it works," when shown what his mother will look like after surgery. A scene of Sam and his mother going through the restaurant's security checkpoint follows the pre-surgery demo in the European version. The US cuts straight to the maitre d' greeting Sam's mother. The US version omits almost discussing the advantages of acid over conventional plastic surgery, while including a unique insert of Sam before Shirley turns and offers him salt. Sam pulling up Mrs. Buttle's information is cut in the US version. I was on the fence about whether to call this a simple trim, but I decided its unique insert shot of the computer terminal booting up edged it into the differences column. Sam's samurai dream sequence is segmented out and distributed differently in the US edit, where it is also slightly abridged. In the European version it plays as one individual sequence, while the American cut stops after the samurai's first disappearance. This sequence resumes after Mr. Heltman inadvertently shows Sam the code to his private elevator in the US version, which is arguably kind of a weird place to put it, but it later rounds out Sam's tussle with police before being knocked out, where it makes much more sense. Both US and European versions' samurai dream sequences work quite well though, I think, and it's generally clever how the sequence was split out for the American edit. Amid the trimming of Spoor telling Sam he can no longer live at his flat, the US cut appears to use different footage of Sam reaching over Spoor for the phone. Sam almost runs into Lime as he heads towards the stairs, Lime telling Dawson goodnight. A second of extra footage of Sam descending the stairs covers a trim of him heading to reach them in the US version. The US version removes a scene where Sam wakes up to Jill, naked and wrapped as a present, just before she's killed and he's captured. I'd love to know if there was a studio note on this, since this was made in the 80s, so I'm guessing this has nothing to do with nudity, but was removed for the bow, which links it back to Christmas, or more importantly Jill is no longer wearing the blonde wig, which is fine for a death scene, but too boyish a depiction of female sexuality for 80s Hollywood executives. The biggest omission from the US version is the lengthy sequence of Sam being advised of his financial options to pay for his interrogation, followed by a visit from Mr. Heltman telling him to confess his crimes quickly so this will cost him less money. Sam's processing is itself treated like interrogation and is, or would be, arguably the most disturbing sequence in the whole film. In the European version, the maitre d' shows Sam to his mother during the funeral sequence, while in the US there is a unique shot of Sam turning his head as the woman laughs. At the start of the end credits, the US version actually has half a second more up top of Jack and Mr. Heltman leaving Sam on the platform, the background eventually fading away to a cloudy sky and credits. The US version speeds up the credits crawl though, so it is ultimately shorter in overall length. I could go on for a while on this one. I first saw and fell in love with the US version, and the clouds ending had a lot to do with that. Revisiting it now though, I'm less enthusiastic. While I still think it adds complexity to its emotional impact, seeing it again on a good-looking home theater setup, I've got to admit that the optical work really isn't up to snuff, and I can see why Gilliam opted against reusing it in the Criterion cut. I imagine many may think that it is, but the cloud ending isn't a Sid Sheinberg invention. A script dated October 1983 ends very close to Gilliam's US release, describing Sam sitting in the interrogation chair, his surroundings floating away, turning into a glorious sky. Though both the clouds open and close were introduced to audiences with the US theatrical release, I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't already in the film at some point prior to then, particularly as the Moldauer's Brazil can be heard cutting out in the same spot just prior to the Ducks ad in the European release. Trims are a little more difficult to go over, not to pinpoint, but because they often amount to less than a couple seconds of footage, though some were obviously intended to keep depressing things from being lingered on, possibly to appease Universal. Many seem meant to just move things along, and are often unnoticeable until placed side by side. Apart from maybe a few frames here and there, the following are all the trims for the American version found in the European cut. Simon Jones reading charges. Kurtzman looking over the MOI Buttle report. Close-up of the MOI Buttle report. I Spy operators and the I Spy spinning out of control. Sam attempting to stuff up the heating vent. Sam flinging his arm at the smoke. Sam wafting the smoke outside and plugging jacks into the telephone. Sam and Harry looking at the heating wires, with the US having a few more frames of the wires. Sam folding paper. Sam stuffing the tube. Sam celebrating sending it off. Kurtzman handing Sam paperwork. Kurtzman watching Sam get ready to sign his name, and Sam then signing Kurtzman's name. Vehicle tires before Sam's personal transporter comes into frame. Kid with the bag over his head being abandoned. Some of Sam's dialogue explaining why he's presenting Mrs. Buttle with a check.
I'll tell you what it is. It seems that Mr. Buttle was overcharged by information retrieval. Yes.
Mrs. Buttle embracing her son, crying as Sam races to find Jill. Sam struggling to get a mattress over the personal transporter fire. Sam patting the mattress over the transporter fire. Sam pulling the mattress off the transporter. Mr. Kurtzman complaining.
Want something from us? Oh, yes.
A few frames of the cube tube. Footage of Sam finding Spore working on the wall wiring. A few frames after Mr. Heltman blows away his elevator code, followed by him and Sam still shaking hands. Sam going up in the elevator and then the lift as it arrives at its floor. Sam taking the chair off the desk. Sam leaving his office and getting swept up by a wave of executives, where he is reminded to file a report of his personal transporter. This is the longest section I've classified as a trim, and I could have put it in the differences section. Floors 45 through 47 on the elevator number board. Sam's expression as he begins to read what the receptionist is transcribing. Sam nearly going into the main interrogation chamber. Sam asks Jack if he's going to keep calling Allison Barbara.
Why ever not? Barbara's a perfectly good name, isn't it?
Jack asking Holly how she's getting on. Sam parroting Jack's having called Jill a subversive. Sam asking Jack what he intends to do about Jill and planting the seed for his offering to try and find her unofficially.
What, here? So that she can spill the beans inside the department?
Jack as he heads to his wardrobe to get Sam a suit. Holly reaching to wave Jack goodbye. Sam taking the suit from Jack as Jack heads out the door. Door 5001 before opening. Sam flipping through Jill's file while in the lift. Sam frantically pushing buttons. Sam as the elevator reaches the basement. Sam visibly saying shit, which is heard as he just enters the basement in the US version. A few frames of Sam running up the stairs. A second of Sam not knowing what to push in Heltman's private elevator. Half a second of Sam saying what as he gets caught in Heltman's elevator. Sam opening the elevator door. Sam saying this isn't my suit, moved off screen in the US. The guard shaking his head as Sam identifies himself. The guard asks Sam what day it is, followed by Sam telling him it will have to wait. Sam only gets "oh god" out off screen in the US before trailing off with his run. Sam trailing paper as he leaves the ministry. Half a second of Sam hearing the woman upset by his littering. The upset woman calls Sam an illiterate foreign pig. A little more of the woman scolding him. Quarter of a second as Sam reaches the landing at the depot. Sam spotting Jill from the landing. A few extra frames of Jill taking the package. A shot of Sam as Jill laughs, followed by Jill laughing. Sam looking for Jill and stepping over bodies. Sam taking his coat off to put over a wounded woman. An officer approaching Jill attending to one of the wounded. Sam seeing and preparing to fight the samurai in the department store before getting conked on the head. In the US, this actually cuts to the last section of the samurai dream sequence before returning to his getting conked. Half a second is trimmed of Sam's coming to on the police van floor. Dialogue about the police's helmets causing sweat while Sam continues to roll around on the floor. The police and Sam as he gets up off the floor. Sam as he starts opening jackets looking for Jill. Jack and Sam heading to the elevator, some of the dialogue in the lift. Some of Sam's heading home from work. Beginning and end of a shot of Sam and Jill walking down the street. A few frames as they enter Sam's mother's apartment. The guard choir practicing after Arthur is scolded for being flat on the G. Sam looking around Mr. Heltman's office. Sam's putting Jill's deletion paper back in his coat. A few frames after Jill asks, Footage of Sam seeing Jack entering the room. Jack as he approaches Sam. My favorite trims, which would seem to be from a note about Sam not looking heroic as he fumbles with the gun he's given. Some frames are removed. Beginning and end of the shot of Sam running to Alma's funeral. Less than a second of the exterior of the mortuary. Mother sticking out her tongue as she flirts with the would-be suitors. Sam after he says please. Sam covering his mouth at seeing Alma's gelatinous remains. I first saw Brazil at just the right time. Young enough to identify with its self-absorbed, willfully ignorant protagonist, old enough to have seen my first glimpse of how much adulthood was going to suck. So I was more than a little worried about revisiting it. I'm happy to say I do think Brazil mostly holds up, and I guess you could say that I like it, if you're even supposed to like a movie like Brazil. But I can't say I still find it the perfect work I did at the end of my teens. Like most dystopian fiction, Brazil points out society's problems without offering any solutions, and it's brimming with intellectual dichotomy and moral relativism. Both edits Gilliam delivered in the 80s go out of their way to show audience stand-in Sam as directly responsible for hurting people, if not outright killing them. At first glance, his body count isn't even that far off from the Ministry of Information's. He's at least partly responsible for Jill's death, a woman he barely even knows, as he is unaware he's not as protected as he thinks he is. Among his lesser offenses, Sam sketches away obliviously on public transport while a one-legged woman on crutches is forced to stand, and he seems to have broken the leg of coworker Lime fighting over their shared desk space. Although this last offense is only shown in the European release, I think the scenes of Sam's being processed and Mr. Heltman's visit dressed as Father Christmas go a long way in depicting the ministry's sadistic bureaucracy as far more evil than Sam's disastrous negligence. While these scenes make the last act of the film almost unrelentingly oppressive, I imagine both Gilliam and his fans would argue that's kind of the point, and I agree excluding them damages the movie. The European cut might represent Brazil in its best available form, but I suppose we'll never know if this was its best possible form. Gilliam's US edit isn't merely a hatchet job to get the running time down, and having already seen his first two 80s offerings, I was and remain disappointed how little his final cut wound up reworking or adding to the film. If you found the European version so satisfying, why change it at all? But seeing clouds at the start of the Criterion version, I expected at least my god it works from the American version, and I can't help but think how, since the Criterion fixes at least one optical below par in both 80s releases, how might the clouds ending look had it been matted properly? Clouds or no, I'm of the opinion this is a missed opportunity, and would have preferred either the European release or a truly expanded, reworked version of the film. In terms of being forced to make cuts back in the 80s, I'm surprised Gilliam and editor Julian Doyle don't seem to have considered cutting Alma's funeral sequence. While I can see how Gilliam and his fans would likely think it's essential, it's stylistically more Ken Russell than Terry Gilliam, and the film maybe doesn't need or know what to do with its inherent Freudian symbolism and misogyny. It certainly doesn't make Sam any more likable, reminding us of his issues with aging and sex, and religion too, I guess, though the film seems to posit consumerism as a sin that goes against the tenets of Christ. But contradictions aside, just from a practical standpoint, both top and tail of the sequence is just Sam running. It would have been an easy 2 minutes to take out. Brazil is Brazil though. Whatever I can say about how some of it's aged, Gilliam today or his later work, Brazil remains an important film, and it's sadly as relevant today as it was nearly 40 years ago. It might not be It's a Wonderful Life, but if you're going to argue Die Hard is a Christmas movie and you have a hard time dealing with the holidays, maybe Brazil can become your new wintertime movie. Composer Michael Kamen did do the music for both Brazil and Die Hard, so Merry Christmas! Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please click like and subscribe. I hope to be back soon with another comparison